Hello everyone, I'm Adam Parry, editor and co-founder at Event Industry News, and welcome to a very special edition of our podcast, and if you are watching or listening in today. As you already know, COVID-19 has had a massive effect on our industry. Less than a week ago, a petition was created to ask the government for help. This was the brainchild of Matt Rakowski, who I have here with me today of DBpixelhouse. He's here to tell us a little bit more about exactly why he started the petition, where that petition is up to now, and actually why over 100,000 event profs are actually calling for. Matt, can you just give us a brief overview of the petition and why you launched it?
Yeah, certainly. So obviously, as the majority of people watching this are aware, the events industry has taken a massive hit because of the COVID-19 crisis. And it's something really that's had an impact on our business at DB since the back end of January, and certainly throughout February, and the future's looking quite bleak, really. So it kind of came to me one evening, really, that what can I do together? Because I think that this is obviously, it's a global crisis and it doesn't just affect our industry. But if we come together with one voice and represent our argument to government and to Parliament, then hopefully we can achieve something. So the idea for the petition came about because of that. Launched it on Thursday evening, noticed it got a very big following straight away, and then we went through the 100,000 mark last night, which is fantastic, really. And I think it's currently on about 113,000, so it's still growing, which is good.
That's brilliant. And I think I'd want to go into a little bit more detail on some of those points. I've got a bunch of questions for you, which I hope we can get through quite quickly, because I'm sure people are eager to hear about them. Obviously, the main focus of the petition is to offer financial support to our sector, to businesses and to individuals within it. I suppose my first question to you is if the government does offer this financial support, do you think this would effectively be a loan to business owners that we would need to pay back, or would it be, I suppose, some kind of bailout that we've seen in financial sectors and other industries in the past?
Well, I think, to be honest, any help right now for the event sector is greatly appreciated. The primary concern of everybody at this point in time should be looking after their own health and well-being and that of their families. The fact that we're having to be very nervous and quite frankly scared and frightened of our financial health as much as our actual physical and mental health is a huge concern. So I believe that the government needs to do something to help lighten the load that at the moment we're carrying very, very heavily on our shoulders. That could be in the terms of a bailout, as in terms of grants. However, it's arguable how sustainable that is, depending how long the crisis continues for. Another option, which I've canvassed various people within the industry, would be effectively interest-free loans. So whether that's an injection of cash that's paid back over a period of 12 months or 5 years or however long. I think really we're in a situation where we're dealing with sort of hypothetical examples, because we've never encountered a crisis like this before, because we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know what the impact will be, and it's not something that affects an individual business or even an individual country. It's a global crisis, and obviously the UK event sector is a valuable member of UK PLC, both at home and abroad, flying the flag for British businesses. And we really need the government to step in and help us out at this, which is, you know, absolutely our hour of need.
I would absolutely agree. And I suppose that brings me on to my next question. You know, how much of the industry feels this is a key point that Parliament need to discuss. We've already said that we've seen over 100,000 signatures already sign that petition, and I think you estimate, don't you, that it's probably over 500,000 people that are directly work within the industry, whether that be a supplier, organizer, contractor, etc. What's your thoughts on how much traction the petition's already gained? Do you see it as a good sign? Would you have expected more? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. You know, thank you if you're watching this and you have signed and you have shared it. Thank you ever so much for the support. I mean, I think that realistically, if you work in the events industry, you are taking a hit one way or another. I can't imagine of any events business right now that is thriving in this situation. So with that in light, it's unlikely that somebody who works in the events industry sees the petition and goes, no, I'm not going to sign that. Of course people are going to sign it. I'm touched and I'm pleased really that it's gained so much traction so quickly. But ultimately, I'm probably not that surprised, because online research estimates that around about 500,000 people are employed directly within the events industry. That figure would be different depending which source that you get it from, because people classify events as different things. You know, whether you're looking at concerts, trade shows and exhibitions, corporate brand activations, even theatre, weddings, nightclub events, etc. Technically, they're all events, and we don't really know whether that includes freelance staff as well, because the data doesn't sort of break it down into that. But whichever way you look at it, if you're talking about a figure of 500,000 people, that's an awful lot of people who are very, very worried right now, and that their jobs and their livelihoods really are at stake.
Yeah, I've personally seen it on DJs that I follow that play or were going to be playing through the summer in Ibiza and other locations. So I think it's already gained traction in areas that I personally didn't think it would, and that's great to see. And I suppose now is a really good time to say that if you haven't signed the petition, sorry, or you know somebody that works in the events industry and you're listening to this podcast or watching it online, I would encourage you to share it as well. The more exposure that this petition gets, the more emphasis is there on Parliament and government to discuss it.
If I could just pick up on something very quickly there as well. I mean, I am pleased, impressed, you know, by the numbers that have signed the petition. But I'm also, you know, very touched and humbled actually by the amount of personal emails and social media messages that I've got from people, you know, whether they are a direct competitor of ours, whether they're a colleague that I've formerly worked with, whether it's somebody who's got a business that I wouldn't really have thought of. You know, I had a message from a pyrotechnic company. I had a message from a lady that runs a troupe of dancers that works in nightclubs and places like Ibiza, etc. You know, these are all affected by the current situation. And in terms of the petition, I think that even if you have signed it and you have shared it, I think collectively we still need to get more momentum behind it. The momentum we've got is great. It gives us a mandate to start lobbying and petitioning government seriously to put this agenda on the table. But I think we need to move to the next step as well, to try and get some exposure in the national press. I was reading this morning about how the airlines are already asking for a bailout due to a coronavirus crisis. Now, they've only really been taking a hit for probably a week or so effectively in a large number. Previously, I've already said that we've been bearing the brunt of this for, you know, a good 5 to 6 weeks, if not slightly longer.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen those headlines myself. And just touching on some points that you said there about how you've seen it being shared in other locations around the world or other people. Obviously, this petition is for UK government, right? Do you see other governments following suit? Have you seen anything else already that other governments have announced in a similar capacity?
Well, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's around 12 billion euros that Denmark has put forward to assist business during this time. I've read that the French finance minister has said that they're willing to inject tens of billions of euros to ensure that businesses don't bear the financial burden of the current crisis. And, you know, that's essential, because nobody saw this coming. Businesses don't forecast for losing, you know, potentially 3 to 6 months work. And kind of one of the double sort of whammy, if you like, is that this has hit us during our busy period. So February and March is typically a very busy period for us and for a lot of other people within the events industry. And the cash that's earned during that period of time would often stretch over a much longer period in terms of covering the wage bill, repaying any loans or paying suppliers, etc. So we're in desperate need here for help and support.
I'd agree, and I think, you know, we are in the year of Glastonbury and Farnborough International and a number of other major events that don't necessarily always happen every single year in, year out, bring a huge amount of money into the sector, but also a huge amount of money into the economy, right, from tourism and travel and business. Just to touch on that in terms of the economic value and putting that into perspective, what sort of contribution have you looked? I've got some stats on EIN. Have you had a look at anything? What does it mean to the UK industry?
Well, look, the data that I used for the petition, which is in the text on the government's website, is 14 billion a year, which is what the events industry contributes to the UK economy. You can do various research around various different websites that it goes anything up to 70 billion or slightly lower than the 14 billion. So the angle that I've taken is that our industry is worth at least 14 billion, which it means we're not a cottage industry. You know, it's a vital part of UK PLC. There are over 25,000 UK businesses that support and supply events, not just in the UK, but around the world. And as we already touched on, the half a million staff, approximately, at least, I guess.
Yeah, we are an extremely important thread of facilitation within probably most
and that
industries
obviously
and sectors around the world.
The 14 billion that we're looking at there, as you just mentioned, people coming into the country, whether they're going to Glastonbury, whether they're going to see a theatre show in the West End, or whether they're exhibiting at a trade show at Excel or the NEC. That doesn't include the revenue that they're bringing into the UK.
Absolutely. And obviously the petition, that's not the be all and end all, right? This is just essentially the start. And I know you've sent me the letter that you've written this morning. Could you just explain a little bit more about the letter? Has anyone replied? What information was in the letter, etc., to give the listeners and viewers a bit more of a clearer picture?
Yeah, of course. So the petition really, whilst it's fantastic to get to 100,000 signatures, it really is it's an arbitrary number. It doesn't actually achieve anything in itself, apart from giving us a mandate now. Now we've got that level of support, this gives us the momentum and the mandate to move forward and to put real pressure on the government. So this morning I started that by writing letters to my own local MP, to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, to the Prime Minister and the Secretaries for Business, I think Media and Culture, International Trade and the Department for Work and Pensions, as well as their shadow cabinet counterparts. Those letters were already sent off this morning, so unfortunately I've not had any replies so far, but later on today and tomorrow morning I'm going to be following all of those up with a telephone call. And the content of those letters really was just to outline my suggestions for how I think that the economic support should come from the government. Because it's one thing to simply ask, hey, look, you know, we need help, but what I'm doing now is I'm bringing to the table various different options.
Absolutely. I suppose we've touched on this ever so slightly, and my next question actually comes over to those freelancers that this industry relies heavily upon in order to facilitate work, you know, the flexible working hours, the flexible working patterns. Us ourselves, on our events, we use a number of freelancers that we pull in and their expertise at that time. And as far as I know at the moment, they currently aren't entitled to statutory sick pay. And from memory, that's only around about £100, which is not a lot, right? In the grand scheme of things, £100 a week. Do you think they will be covered, or do you think we can include them in something like this petition to get aid themselves, even though they're self-employed?
Yeah, I do. That's one of my suggestions that I put to the government is to treat self-employed people. I mean, I'm not self-employed right now, so I'm probably not the best person to represent the freelancers or the self-employed, but I have been. And when I was self-employed, I was classed as a sole trader, which technically makes me a business. So if we're asking governments to support businesses through this period of time, then that should also extend to sole traders too. So they would be eligible for any grants or loans to help them through this period.
Yeah, I think it's really important because some of those, in fact, a lot of those freelancers, the skill set, the knowledge, the expertise that they have themselves isn't actually available by just knocking on another company's door and buying that service in. It's not a product, it's years of experience and knowledge, like I've said, and those are key people within our industry that help support our business and our events happen. So personally, I think it would be extremely important to get them covered off on that.
Yeah, it is. And if I could just jump in there actually very quickly. I mean, we talk about SSP, statutory sick pay, but for me, the issue isn't only if somebody's off sick, because catching the coronavirus is still relatively unlikely. What we're dealing with at the moment is 100% certainty that we're losing work. We might have a 20%, 30%, 40% chance of catching the virus, which, you know, let's hope that we don't. But at the moment, we have 100% likelihood of having cancelled work. So whilst statutory sick pay solves the problem potentially, if we're ill, what it doesn't do is it doesn't subsidise for lost income, which is where the suggestion for the government support in terms of interest-free loans or a grant bailout, if you like, would obviously help.
Yeah, no, very good point, Matt, and I agree with that as well. What else can the government do? I think there's been suggestions from other people about payment holidays, individuals, event businesses. I've even heard mutterings of potential government offering, individuals payment holidays on mortgage payments and stuff. And in fact, I've had an email from Halifax myself this morning offering some advice and some help around those things. Do you think there's anything else that government can do to alleviate, to spread the weight of this at the moment for our sector?
I think that there's a lot that the government can do, really. It has been discussed for banks and landlords to provide payment holidays to people struggling to make those payments if they're affected by the coronavirus crisis. And I think that the government needs to put that pressure on those banks to do that. It wasn't that long ago, if people can remember, that the banks were going cap in hand to the government asking for them to be bailed out. So it might be quite nice if they were helping us at that point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. We never forget, do we? Matt, there's obviously a lot of people that have already signed the petition. For those that have signed the petition, or for those that haven't, what else can we do to help support you with your discussions or your move on Parliament right now?
Okay, so if you look at my social media feed, I've actually put a copy of the letter, one of the letters that I sent to my local MP, which does have the full list of recommendations and suggestions, what we're asking for collectively. And really, I think that the biggest thing that people could do right now is that, well, there's several things. They can continue to share the petition. Obviously, I'm guessing most people that are probably watching this have already signed it. If you haven't, please do. But please share it in as many places as you possibly can. And don't be afraid to share it multiple times. We don't really want to be spamming people. But, every couple of days, if it gets a few extra signatures to that number, the higher the number gets, the more mandate that gives us to push forward to government. And just write to your local MP and to whichever government ministers are appropriate. Really, that's kind of where we are right now. We may change tact, move in a slightly different way over the coming days, really, because the time for action is now. We can't wait until next week or next month, because it's not being, particularly dramatic to say that people's jobs and livelihoods are on the line now. We need action. Ideally, I'd like to see action taken this week, and I'm not going to really rest or give up until somebody's listened to my argument and taken affirmative action from a government perspective. That's
great to hear, mate. We've covered a lot here, and I'm sure there'll be more of these that we can do together as things progress. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to mention, or take this opportunity to mention? If there's not, don't worry. But if there is, feel free to speak now.
Yeah, once again, just thank you to everybody that supported the cause. I think it's obviously it's a cause that affects all of us. I may have started it, but I'm not the main person, I guess, behind this, because we're all doing this collectively, and we can't afford to let up. I really think that it's that serious. We can't afford just to be pushed into a corner on this. There will be many businesses or many industries over the coming weeks and months that are turning to the government for help. We need to make sure that we're represented. Are we more important than the retail industry or the airline industry? No, probably not, but they're no more important than us either, because at the end of the day, businesses all exist really to give people jobs, to earn salaries, to live their lives. And if we haven't got an industry, we haven't got jobs, and we haven't got salaries, then, well, I suppose ultimately we become a burden on the state. So the state can jump in now and help us out and prevent that from happening, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody that's listening or watching, please, if you haven't signed the petition, please do. If you haven't shared it with your network or your business or even your friends and family, please do. Like Matt says, the more signatures that we get on this petition, the more impetus there is on the government to discuss it. Matt, thank you very much for joining me today. I know it was short notice. We will leave links below to Matt's socials, to other posts, to the petition, and other resources for listeners and viewers here today. Again, like, share and comment. Let's spread the news about this petition. Let's get government to discuss this in Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you.